Hi again. This time I'm going to demonstrate the procedures that we'll use in the mixtures laboratory, which is called the Chromatography Lab. I say the mixtures laboratory because in this unit we're studying mixtures and different components of mixtures, and chromatography is one way to separate the components of a mixture. So we are going to be separating the components of ink, and we're going to imagine that somebody has forged a pass, written the teacher's name on the pass, and that we have 3 suspects for this forgery. And those 3 suspects each have a black pen similar to the one that is used on the pass. So your task will be to decide which pen was used to sign the pass. In order to do that, you're going to have to wear your safety goggles because we're going to use a solvent. And a solvent is a substance that's able to dissolve another substance. So this contains both water and alcohol, and that's the formula for the alcohol. And alcohol is able to dissolve a lot of other substances. Solvents are often used in cleaning because of their ability to dissolve things. So in this experiment, you're going to be trying to dissolve the ink, so we would call the ink the solute, using this solvent, which is alcohol. And each of the inks will look a little different when it's dissolved and separated using chromatography, and that will help us to identify which ink was used for the pass. So there's 2 parts to the procedure. One part involves testing the pass. In order to test the pass, you could cut a small piece of the pass so that you have like a little strip. Make sure that there's some ink on that strip of paper, and then you're going to place this beaker with a little bit of solvent in the bottom, and then you're going to place that strip of paper in the beaker so that the liquid can rise up the paper. So I'm just going to use my fold and tear method because I didn't bring the scissors over. So here's a strip of pass with a little bit of ink on it. I'm going to place it in this liquid, and I'm going to let the liquid climb up the paper. Traditional copy paper is not as absorbent as filter paper, which is what we'll see. So that one might not work as well as the others. You should also see in your tray 3 pieces of filter paper, and this is for testing the 3 pens. So you want to set up the filter paper by marking it. You can either use a dot or a line. You'll see different methods, but try to be consistent. I like to use a dot about 1 centimeter up from the bottom of the paper. So if you have a ruler, you can measure 1 centimeter up and add a dot. And then I also want to make sure I know which marker was used for each one. You might put the marker next to the paper when it's being tested, or you might also put the initials of the marker at the top. I'm going to do that because the top of the paper shouldn't get wet, and so you should be able to see that letter afterwards. Then I'm going to add a little bit of my solvent to this test tube. That's why I'm wearing my safety glasses. You don't need very much. And the important part is, I will show you, when you add the paper, you want to make sure the ink stays above the liquid line. So you could do this in your test tube rack, but I just want to show you that I want the paper to touch the liquid, but I don't want the ink to be underneath the liquid. So I'm going to fold the paper over at the top so that it stays. And then the liquid is going to climb up the paper and take the ink with it, but hopefully the paper is not going to fall in and sink down into the liquid. This is specially designed paper that's called filter paper, and so it's going to work a little bit quicker than the pass itself, which is why they recommend that you set up the pass first. And I'm going to see if we might even see some changes while we're waiting here. You're going to use the same procedure for your 2 other pens, and you're going to allow them to climb up the paper, and when they're finished, or when you see enough of a difference between the 3, then you can write your data down in your lab notebook and use that data to help you decide which person was the one who forged the pass. So we're starting to see it separate. Look there. Meaning that the ink blob is getting bigger. And if we wait a little bit longer, you should start to see that there's more than one color appearing there. Some pens can have similar colors that are used in making the ink, but we'll try to give you pens that will give you different results. That way, when you are writing your conclusion, you can say that you are, confident in your result. So I wanted to show you an example of how the conclusion might look for this lab. So in most of our labs, we have numbers for data. In this lab, I'm not going to ask you to write down numbers, but you are going to draw the 3 strips of paper from the 3 pens, and then you are going to explain how you matched the pass to the marker. And you need to be specific. So you want to use specific colors or descriptions in your explanation. It will help if you have the data right there so I can look at it side by side. And then for reasoning for this lab, you want to explain like the process that we use to separate the inks and how you know that this ink matches the other one. So give a little bit more detail. Pretend you're explaining the conclusion to somebody who doesn't know anything about the lab. A lot of times crime scene investigators are actually called into court to testify, and they have to explain in their own words and in what are called layman's terms how they know that the evidence matches the suspect. That's what I want you to do in this case. So for this conclusion, it's a little different than our other conclusions. You are going to focus on identifying a suspect. You could say the suspect with the Crayola marker or the suspect with the Sharpie, for example. And then once you're finished to clean up, we're just going to throw out the used strips of paper, and you can dump a small amount of alcohol and water down the drain, but you should turn the water on when you do so, and you should wear your safety glasses if you're the one that's doing that. Okay, that's it. Good luck.